political scientist says the CCJ referendum result in Antigua is not an indictment on the ruling party. And in sports, Jamaica draw with CONCACAF giants Mexico in the Under-20 World Cup qualifiers. I'm Ricardo Robertson. This is Caribbean in 10 for Thursday, November 8th. I'll be back with the details after the break. We begin in Antigua and Barbuda, where political scientist and pollster Peter Wickham says citizens' rejection of the government's move to make the Caribbean Court of Justice, the CCJ, the country's final court, is not a reflection that the ruling party is losing ground. Wickham's Caribbean Development Research Services had predicted that the yes vote in Tuesday's CCJ referendum would have received the necessary two-thirds majority to replace London's Privy Council with the regional court, but only 33.5% of the electorate voted in favour of the move. And we'll come back to that story just after this story here. The Seismic Research Center of the University of the West Indies says the number of earthquakes being experienced in Trinidad and Tobago is normal, but it wants citizens to remain on high alert. CNC3's Melissa Williams-Sambrano has that story.
The massive 6.9 earthquake, which was widely felt around the country on August 21st, and the large aftershock which occurred the next day, have left citizens traumatized. So much so that when 10 earthquakes were felt from October 20th to November 2nd, worry and fear again crept into the minds of the population. The events have sparked so much concern that UWI Seismic Research Center, which monitors, studies, and educates the nation on seismic activity, was compelled to issue a statement today. The center says that aside from the 6.9 quake on August 21st, earlier in the year, between January 26th and 28th, there was a burst of more than 20 earthquakes in the Gulf of Paria. UWI Seismic adds the earthquakes being recorded now in the Gulf is in keeping with the pattern expected. It says the other areas around Trinidad will continue to produce their normal annual magnitude output. This means the population can expect just over 50 events of a magnitude greater than 3.5 every year. The Seismic Research Center says given that the two areas in the Gulf of Paria are adjusting following the August 21st earthquake and the annual expected events, the earthquake activity being seen is normal. It adds the present activity has no bearing on the larger magnitude earthquakes that can happen at any time. The Seismic Research Center is calling on the nation to ensure all necessary measures are in place to respond to any great seismic activity.
All right, we go back to our top story where the report from Peter Wickham, which says that the vote does not affect the Gaston Brown-led administration, really. And as we hear in this report from Amar Sayers of ABS News, Wickham says that's no indication that the opposition United Progressive Party, the UPP, which did not agree with the switch to the CCJ at this time, is gaining any ground.
And I think it's my professional opinion that if an election were called tomorrow, he would win again handsomely. The UPP is still in a mess. They still have major issues that they need to deal with in terms of the leadership and the focus, structuring the party and rebuilding it and whatnot. This does not signal by any far stretch of the imagination that the UPP is strong.
That's the declaration political scientist and pollster Peter Wickham made as he noted that the government still has the support of the majority of residents. The political scientist was responding to statements over the airwaves in which persons equated the outcome of the referendum to a victory by the UPP. He suggested that the opposition should refocus and address its leadership matters. Wickham recommended that the government should put the overall issues pertaining to constitutional reform on the back burner at this time.
Personally, I think that matters of constitutional review ought to be off the table for Ali to know, and maybe they can pick them up after the next election if they feel so inclined. But in the meantime, the developmental agenda and other issues that were important, I believe, should be prioritized, and they should press on with those.
So should this country follow in Grenada's footsteps and attempt the referendum on the CCJ a second time?
It takes a lot of energy to put a referendum together. It's costly. And I would think that the government would be ill-advised to go down this road, certainly for the remainder of the parliamentary term. Maybe in the next term, a government may do this, but one would argue that Prime Minister Brown, certainly if he were to win the next election, would not want to see this as a priority.
Amar Sayers reports.
And stay with us, your Midday Sport is next.
My keen eye and 18 rock bass later tell me that this place is loaded with rock bass.
Well, I can assure you, rock bass are not on today's menu. However, I wouldn't mind a bag of Reese's Pieces right about now. Mad fish, phone home.
A small guy. A pickerel, awesome. Just what I've always wanted for Christmas.
Now, back in, I think it was September, this case goes back away, September of 1994. She was on her way to church.
That's correct. And I need to mention, Steve, you know, she was a brilliant girl. Straight A's in school and still is a brilliant girl. That's one important aspect of Rachel.
And she was in this church bus. And there it was her and her two sisters.
Correct.
Grenaders returned to their native Haiti as heroes after taking part in the 2018 Amputee Football World Cup. Now, the French-speaking Caribbean team picked up 3 victories in that tournament that took place in Mexico from October 24th to November 5th. They whipped Spain 2-0 before taking down Ukraine and Angola by 2-1. However, the side was defeated by Poland in the round of 16. Now, on hand to welcome the team on their return home was Sports Minister Edwin Charles, who congratulated the players for their effort. Ranked 5th, the Grenadiers are among the qualifying teams for the World Cup 2020 playoffs to be held either in Poland or Costa Rica. And Jamaica has pulled off a draw against CONCACAF giants Mexico in the Under-20 World Cup qualifiers in Florida. You'll hear more of that story in our major newscast at 6:30. That's Caribbean in 10. Good afternoon.